Hey everybody, what's up? Circus here coming at you with I guess a meta analysis. I got Neg here with me. We're gonna be talking about Onomats and Photons and how they've done in their first couple of days out of the gate here. So, how you doing, Neg?
Doing well, doing well.
All
Glad to
right.
be here.
I'm glad to have you here, honestly. Truly glad to have you here.
It's good. It's good to hear.
Good. Now, these every time a new box comes out, people get pretty excited, right? New cards, new decks, new play styles. It's always exciting. We have two highly anticipated archetypes here, and one is Photons and one is Onomats. So why don't we start with Onomats? I can't even say the word anymore. I've said it so much over the past weekend, but how are they doing right now?
So I think right now, photons have not been doing well, but automats have been, people are still experimenting with them, seeing how they go, that
Because they
sort
were
of
kind of
thing.
okay before this this support came out because they did win a tournament. I mean, they probably had to steal a tournament more than anything, right? I mean, they're not going to power their way through, but Rich Ferrente, he's a pretty good player with Onomet, so he was pretty excited when this came out. But so they weren't bad before the support, but now how are they doing now that they have the support?
Well, I think the support it didn't help them as much as people might think. It was more of like the XYZ cards that like really are pushing the deck, but the support is support, I should say. So, it I do think it's stronger than before, for sure.
Hmm. And what did we get for support, and why is it helping the deck?
So for direct support, stuff that's like in engine, the cards we're getting is the Dododo Dwarf, and then Dwarf is like or Go Glove, however you want to call
Hmm.
it. Um, that card helps the deck a little more with recursion, getting cards back onto great out of the graveyard, recovery, that sort of deal. But in terms of like non-engine support, we got a bunch of new XYZs. We got Malevolent Sin, which is the Spider rank 4. We got new rank 6, which is Photon Strike Bouncer, which is a pretty good negate. Um, and we also got Abyss Dweller, which is, um, from what I've heard, is very impactful in the TCG.
Hmm. No, we're not seeing that quite yet in Duel Links.
Um, we're seeing that it does have applications for sure. Just like a card like Abyss Dweller is like really hard to power creep. Like the effect of saying, okay, you cannot activate effects in the graveyard at all this turn is like super strong against some decks, and so a card like Abyss
Hmm.
Dweller, I don't think you can power creep it really, just because of how impactful the effect is. It's just that we don't see a lot of use out of it right now, just because
Hmm.
of I guess the decks we are using. It's not as valuable, I guess, as some of the other rank fours.
Hmm. So,
But
in your opinion, the extra deck cards uh, are better support than the in core, or would you call them the in engine cards?
yeah, the cards that are like specifically Onomat cards, like
Hmm.
those we're only getting one new Onomat card, but we're getting new cards for Onomats to use, which I think is the real boost.
Hmm. So where are they failing right now? Because I saw in our tournament yesterday, Battle Phase Sunday, they can set up a really good turn one, but we saw Thunder Dragons just play right through it. So
Yeah,
why
so
why is that happening?
so Onomats, I would say like their turn one is actually not their strong suit. I would say their strong suit is going second.
Hmm.
And so going first, they now have the Bouncer, which I mean, of course it's a good card. However, um going second and just OTKing is really where Onomats really shine, I think.
Hmm.
Um OTK deck, like fundamentally it's an OTK deck. It's an aggressive strategy. So if it has to like, turn one spend resources to like not die on the following turn, it's kind of held back to a degree, you know?
Hmm.
Um, it wants to go second. It wants to be able to, you know, like say, hey, True Nade, draw two cards, use skill to get the ideal hand that they want, and then make their plays and go into some XYZs. Um, if it has to go first, then it has to probably use the skill, or you know, it has to use the skill early, and then it has to make like a board just to survive, or they have to gamble by just setting a monster and hoping that's enough, you know?
Hmm.
So I would say going first is definitely the weakness, not the strength, in
Okay.
my opinion.
Well, what we just saw on screen is the Onomat player setting up a decent board. They set up one Xyz monster, then two monsters in defense, and then their opponent playing Photons just on their first turn just book a moon their Xyz monster and then summoned into it. That's probably something we're going to see a lot of in the future, huh?
Um, I think it's definitely something that we could see more of. I think Onomats, like their lack of defense is definitely their weakness. So
Mm-hmm.
that's maybe a problem that they might try to solve with like, instead of going for like hey Trunade, if the meta is all like, oh, if the meta is Thunder Dragons, they don't need Trunade, so maybe they'll go towards like Kiteroid instead, you know, stuff like that. So um, I think it's still a new deck and they're trying to figure some stuff out. So
All
I
right. Well,
think,
let's take a
yeah.
look at Photons because that seems to be the most anticipated deck out of this box. It's an anime favorite, I guess. I don't really follow the anime, but evidently it's a big anime favorite. So, what are we seeing from Photons? Is this going to be a deck worth investing in?
Photons are interesting because they are actually really consistent, but they have some weaknesses. I would say like the primary weakness of Photons is that their monsters don't do a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you look at all of the main deck Photon monsters, the only one that like is a +1 is the Vanisher. All right. So you have Photon Vanish, Photon Thrasher. That's a free special summon. Okay, cool. You have Photon Advancer, which is a free special summon. Okay, cool. Um, you have Photon Vanisher. It's a free special summon, and you get to search Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon. Okay, that's a plus. And then you have Photon uh, Lizard. I'm pretty sure it's called,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the one that searches from the deck. Um, the issue here is that most of them, like, they put bodies onto the board, but like in the current game, just putting bodies onto the board isn't really enough. Just putting monsters onto the field isn't going to win you a game against Noble Knights if like Noble Knights, you know, they have traps engraved, they have floaters on field. Even if you just like swing into them, they put more bodies into play. You need some sort of interruption, which I think the deck is kind of supplementing with the Photon Stream of Destruction. I think that card is that card is really good, and having it searchable with the skill is nice. But the deck itself is not really resilient to interruption.
Now, something you've been talking about for a long time, as long as I can remember, we've been doing these interviews. Usually say the monsters have to do something besides, like in this case, there's putting bodies on the field, but like negates or summoning or whatever, right?
Yeah, so it's like it doesn't have to be the monsters, but like the engine itself has to have like it has to be doing something, you know?
Kind
Like,
of like
and
Noble
typically
Knights, like
most
the Noble
engines
Knight
are
opening.
monsters.
Right, right. I was
But
gonna say
yeah,
kind of
like
like the Noble Knight opening where you're plussing, you're equipping, you're summoning monsters, you're putting stuff in the grave, you're getting stuff in your hand, kind of like that.
yeah, so Noble Knights are a good example of a deck that's like generating a lot of advantage off of just like the engine cards. And just like with an engine heavy hand, they can go +4, for instance,
Hmm. And
and
photons
just
just don't do that.
photons, they don't really plus in the same way other decks do. They kind of +1, and that's like the it. And they kind of hope that their interruptions that they have is enough. Granted, to be fair, uh, photons are very consistent at getting their interruption. So, like setting up a turn one Star Liege Lord Galaxion with the Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon,
Which
and
is
then
what
having
is on the
this.
screen right now.
Oh, all right.
Perfect
Well,
timing.
convenient, but yeah, and having that monster set up with a set photon stream of destruction, that is actually like super consistent. And a lot of people have compared photons to Dark Magician in the sense that it's like they put out two big bodies and then they have one banish, and then that banish, if your deck can't deal with it, you kind of just lose.
Hmm.
And it is similar to Dark Magician in some of those ways. I do agree. I think, however, it is a little weaker than Dark Magician in the sense that it's much harder to set up going second, and it just doesn't like play around stuff quite as well.
And it doesn't have a negate, right? I mean, that's why Dark Magician was so strong because you got a banish from the circle, and then you got a negate from the navigation. Does photons have any negates?
I don't believe they do. I would have to check again, but I'm fairly certain none of their
Because that seems like a pretty like
cards like
if you can set up a negate out on the field from like in engine, like you're saying, that's huge.
yeah. So that's like another thing. They don't have the negate. Um, they do have like a searchable Galaxy Cyclone, which is good removal. However, they don't have any way to just blow out the opponent. Like, oh, if your opponent sets three against Dark Magician just flips navigation, banishes a card, negates another back row, and then they just like swing.
Right.
Whereas Galaxy Eyes, like, they can banish one card, but it's like they kind of need to save it. They need to play more reserved, which is not bad, but it's like power wise, it feels less. Um, it does not feel quite as oppressive as Dark Magician could be,
Hmm.
I should say.
Well, what we were seeing in Battleface Sunday and Battleface Prime, which just happened earlier today, is a lot of these games they go to turn three, maybe turn four. So our photons just maybe a little too slow.
Um, I don't think they're actually quite that slow. I think
Hmm.
their strength is really in the early game, just because they don't generate too much advantage. So, in the early game, if the opponent can't play through the one interruption, or you can actually have multiple interruptions if you have multiple photon streams. So if you can't play through all of the interruptions, then photons do win. And like that's where they're really strong in the early game because they can put so much damage out and interruptions like very fast. Where they're kind of losing out is if it goes past the early game or if they can't set up.
Okay.
So that's something I've been kind of alluding to, where photons they don't set up well as Dark Magician. I think a lot of people would joke like, "Oh, Dark Magician just loses to one Cosmic Cyclone," and that while partially true, they could still play, and like a Cosmic Cyclone is like it's not always ran. It wasn't always ran at like three copies in every deck. But like
Hmm.
you can interrupt photons with much more. If you have a Canadia or a Karma Cut or Floodgate or pretty much anything that can disrupt a monster
Hmm.
summon, like you can disrupt a photon setup. So like they go summon Thrasher, they summon another monster, they go into Galaxion, and then Karma Cut hits the Galaxion. It's like there was a lot of investment made, but like they couldn't make their play because they went second. So
Hmm. So
they do struggle somewhat, like playing through interruptions.
so between the two decks, Onomats and Photons, which one do you think is going to do better going forward here?
If I were to Yes, I would definitely think Onomats have more potential.
Hmm.
Just because their skill to just you add any two Onomat cards from your deck to your hand like is really strong, and they can run True Nade, and they have a draw too. For these reasons, I think they have a lot of potential and have like a decent amount of growing room. I think Photons they don't quite have as much potential just because they're a little more slow. But I do think that there is stuff to look at. I think I saw today even that someone was running Necro Valley and Photons, which is I know not everyone likes when decks just try to abuse Necro Valley, but
Right,
like
right.
Photons, they don't use the graveyard at all. So
They don't
if
care.
yeah, just Necro Valley, and then it's like we're not using the graveyard. I don't care. Like I'll just keep playing the Photons, or Photons will just like keep summoning monsters. And so I think if they are able to use those like high power either floodgate or interruptions to high good effect, they can maybe see some more use. But I think if it's just all photon cards, then it won't it won't go as far.
All right. Well, what we can do is maybe check back in a week and see if people mess around with the deck a little bit because there's going to be a lot of tournaments this coming week. We just did Battle Phase Prime Day, which is our one of our paid tournaments, so people take things a little bit more serious. They try hard. We're gonna have a bunch of free ones, and then I do believe the MCS is this weekend. Damage Step is this weekend, so two more paid tournaments. The Meta Weekly. So there's gonna be a lot of tournaments going on, a lot of testing. So we're gonna see a lot going on with these decks over the next week. So we'll have to see where we are in about a week. How about that?
All right, sounds like a plan.
All right. So we're going to get out of here, but you should get in the Discord. Why? Because it's free. The tournaments are free, except for the pay ones I just mentioned. The new player help is free. I'm here on Saturday nights, or actually on Twitch doing the new player stream. That's a lot of fun. Neg streams randomly on our channel throughout the week, so make sure to try and catch that. It's always a good time. So we're going to get out of here. I'm Circus. That's Neg.
Take it easy.
And we'll see you next time.